Ever bought a cheap gaming laptop that promised big screen performance in a backpack, only to find yourself stuck with stuttering frame rates, an overheating chassis, and a battery that dies the minute you launch a single game? I've been there, and the disappointment usually turns into a lingering regret that makes you wonder if you should have saved up for something a little more serious. The Dell 14 Premium, which Dell markets as the next-gen XPS-LEVEL notebook, is trying to be that smarter buy. A laptop that looks sleek enough for a boardroom, but claims enough muscle for modern gaming. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What makes the hesitation real is the balancing act between portability and performance. At 14.5 inches, the screen is almost notebook size, and the chassis is thin enough to slide into a briefcase without wobbling. That's great for a software engineer who wants to code on the go or a creative professional who needs a secondary display for Photoshop layers. But the same thinness means there's less room for big heat sinks, and that's where the trade-off shows up when you try to push the machine for a marathon gaming session. The heart of this Dell is the Intel Core Ultra 7255H, a 16-core processor that can sprint up to 5.0 GHz. In everyday tasks compiling code, rendering video thumbnails, juggling multiple VMs, it feels instantly responsive. When you launch a game like Valorant or Fortnite, the CPU keeps up, and the integrated graphics, while not a dedicated RTX card, manage to hold 1080p at 60 frames per second on low to medium settings. I tried a few esports titles for an hour each, and the frame time stayed stable, with only occasional dips when the fan kicked in. That's a practical strength. You can actually game on a laptop that's marketed for professional workflows without the experience feeling like a half-hearted afterthought. Heat is where the story gets nuanced. The ultra-portable chassis runs the fan at a noticeable pitch once the GPU and CPU are both above 80°C, which happens after about 15 minutes of sustained FPS action. It's not a screaming alarm, but it's audible enough that you'll notice it in a quiet coffee shop. The laptop does a decent job of directing hot air out the side vents, so the keyboard stays warm rather than scorching. If you're comfortable with a little background hum, it's manageable. If you need absolute silence for recording voiceovers, you'll probably have to keep the workload lighter or use an external cooling pad. Keyboard feel is another practical point. Dell kept the classic XPS key travel about 1.3 mm, with a slight concave dip that helps guide your fingers. For long coding marathons, the tactile feedback reduces fatigue compared to the mushy membranes you find on budget gaming notebooks. The backlighting is adjustable per zone, which is a nice touch when you're gaming in dim rooms or typing late-night scripts. However, the keys lack a dedicated macro row, so if you rely on programmable keys for complex game combos or development shortcuts, you'll need external peripherals. Battery life is the classic laptop dilemma amplified by gaming. Dell equips the 14 Premium with a 63 battery, which delivers roughly 6 to 7 hours of mixed productivity emails, spreadsheets, a bit of web browsing. Switch to a game, and you're looking at 1 to only 1.5 hours before the charger becomes mandatory. That's because the high-refresh 120Hz panel, while gorgeous for scrolling through code or watching a 4K video, draws more power than a standard 60Hz screen. If you plan to game on a train or in a cafe without a power outlet, you'll need to keep expectations modest or bring a power bank that supports the Dell's USB-C charging. Display quality deserves its own shout-out. The 14.5-inch WUXGA panel, 19201200, is slightly taller than a traditional 1080p screen, giving you extra vertical real estate for IDE windows or chat logs while you game. The narrow bezels make the laptop feel larger than it is, and the 120Hz refresh rate is smooth enough to notice the difference when you're sprinting in a shooter. Color accuracy is decent out of the box, but you'll want to calibrate if you're doing color-critical photo or video work. For most gamers, the combination of sharpness, brightness, and smooth motion feels premium for a sub-15-inch notebook. Connectivity is where Dell tries to future-proof the machine. 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports mean you can daisy-chain an external GPU, a 4K monitor, and a fast SSD dock without needing a dongle. The inclusion of Wi-Fi 7 promises lower latency in crowded networks, useful for competitive online play where every millisecond counts. The microSD slot is a small convenience for photographers who need quick offload, And the 1080p RGB-IR webcam, while not a gaming-grade camera, works fine for Zoom calls and streaming facecam overlays. Now let's talk